Okay, so we're going to begin. Tonight we're going to do a different topic than the regular, even though we're in the middle of a series about the various midot characteristics. Baruch Hashem, we covered several. Bezat Hashem, we'll continue with that series next week. Tonight I want to do something about Chanuka. Since Chanuka, Bezat Hashem, is this Friday, even though we've covered this topic in the past, there's always new ideas, points that perhaps we've not covered in depth, that perhaps we should cover this time. Many of you perhaps recall when I gave a lecture about the human being, the creation of man, we spoke at length about the various elements of which he's comprised. The Yesodot HaAdam, Adam Murkav, he consists of the elements of air, fire, water, and earth. These are the four elements of which everything the Maaseh in this world is comprised of. And there are some parts of this creation that have more of one element than the other. Man has all four, and we all have, each individual has perhaps one element that is stronger in him than the rest of them. The common denominator, however, of the elements of air and fire is that they, of the four, these two, are purer, are lighter, are higher, and therefore more spiritual. Whereas earth and water are more physical and material, are lower, air and fire are higher, loftier, and therefore more spiritual. That is why the spiritual part of man, the Ruchaniut Shebo, is called Haruach. Even though we sometimes see the term Nefesh HaAdam, we sometimes see the term Nishmat HaAdam, the soul, the spirit, or as Kohelet says, that everything returns to earth, Aval Haruach Tashuv El Elokim, but the spirit of man returns to its maker, to its creator. It goes back from where it comes from. The Ruach, that which is more spiritual, has come from above into this world. And when a person dies and leaves this world, that which is from the ground goes back to the ground, and that which is spiritual goes back to where it came from. So the spirit of man is called the Ruach. Ruach meaning the life or the spirit. And since it is something that comes from above, it goes back to where it came from. This Ruach, or this Ruchaniut in the Adam, this spiritual part of him, expresses itself mostly in the Sechel, in the mind. Whereas all the other elements have a function in the physical body, the Ruach itself, the Neshama, its expression is mostly seen in the Sechel, in the mind. The mind of the human being is something unique, is something very different than what animals have, where they operate by instinct. The human being operates as a captain operates in a ship, by making decisions all the time. It's not pure instincts that are operating in him. Instincts that, of course, we have as well. But we have something called a neshama, and that neshama has endowed us with the ability to make decisions, the ability to exercise free will, the ability to choose between right and wrong. And that, of course, happens through the sechel, what we call the sechel or the mind. Now we can begin to understand a little bit the pasuk in Mishlei Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. The candle of Hashem is the soul of the human being. The soul of the human being is compared to light. And that is why tonight's lecture I would not just want to call Chanuka, but more, what is the meaning of light? Right? After all, Chanuka does have a lot to do with light, with lighting candles. So we want to understand a little bit the significance of what that light is. So Shlomo Melech reminds us that the neshama of one is like the candle of Hashem. It is the candle of Hashem. What does the candle of Hashem have to do with the neshama? Well, first of all, the light of a candle is always looking up, is always aiming up. And the reason for that is because light, as I said earlier, is something very, very fine, something very, very pure. And therefore, it tends to go up, just like gas does. Whereas those things that are heavier tend to drop as a result of gravity. So the light, the nature of light, or the fire, in this case, not the light, but the fire or the flame, is to aim up, because that's where it's coming from. That's where it's originally from. So it wants to go back to where it comes from. Not from the ground, but from somewhere up above. So the neshama is like the ner, or like the flame of the ner, of the candle, in various ways. One way is that it reminds us that we are from above. A part of us, at least, comes from above. The second idea of the light, what does light do? It illuminates the path. It shows us the way of life, like a GPS. It's supposed to guide us. The light of the Torah guides us. The light of the neshama is supposed to guide us. And what else does light do? The flame of a candle. It is able to give over its flame to other candles. You can light thousands of candles with the original candle, and you will not be diminishing anything of the original candle. So a candle has the koach leashpia, to give over to other candles its own light. So that is another characteristic of this flame that we're talking about. So Ner Hashem, Nishmat Adam, this neshama has so much in that it can do, in that it could lead the way, show the way, give to others, right? And of course, the most important perhaps characteristics of this neshama is that it's always aiming to go back to where it comes from. Which, what does it mean to us? It means to us that deep down in the subconscious mind that we just spoke about, in the sechel, where the neshama is, it is actually capable of knowing who its maker is. Since the neshama is a chelek eloka mimal, it is a part of Hashem. Hashem, nishmat adam, it's a part of Him. It actually has, like they say in computers, an embedded chip. It knows where it's from. It knows who made it. If it were to use the sechel, the problem is not everybody uses the sechel, but if a person were to use that mind properly, then he would be able to know through his own mind who created him. In other words, it's not that we just landed here, we have to discover it. Just like Abraham Avinu was able to figure this out on his own, through some, of course, inquiries and research, but he uses sechel to come to the common sense conclusion that yesh borei la'olam, that there is a captain to the ship, there is a balabait, there's somebody in charge over here. And all of that comes about through the sechel. According to a more Kabbalistic way of understanding it, the Ner Hashem is the light of Hashem, Hamitpashet ba'adam. The light of Hashem comes down into this world and expands itself all over the place. The whole universe is full of that light of Hashem. Just that light is so immense, the Kabbalah explains it had to be metzumtzam. It had to be condensed in such a way that we can tolerate it, that we would be able to experience it. Otherwise, we would not be able to handle it, because we are partially physical, and the physical body cannot tolerate that which is completely spiritual. It's just not compatible. We have, of course, a neshama that can handle these things, but this neshama is clothed within a physical body, which is limited. We cannot do everything with our physical body. Our eyes cannot see everything there is to see. There are angels out there. We cannot see them because they're completely spiritual. They have no physical body. But once we divest ourselves of this physical body, we can see things. That is why people can see things in a dream that they cannot see in real life. Because in a dream, you don't have those limitations that we have when we are awake. So this tremendous amount of light comes down into this universe and, of course, permeates everything, but especially the human being who is a part of Hashem. The neshama is a part of Hashem. And that, as I said before, happens through the sechel, through his mind. Perhaps now we can understand also the idea behind lighting a candle for somebody who passed away. Many people do it, they don't even know what they're doing. Now there's, I'm sure, various explanations given for that practice, but one of them has to do with the fact that the two worlds, the upper worlds and the lower worlds, are somewhat connected. Even though those departed souls are no longer with us in the physical world, they are still with us in some ways. By lighting a candle, we're showing this connection of the light of that neshama, that light still has a connection to this world. In other words, through our ma'asim, through our deeds that we do, and that is the meaning of lighting the candle, we are able to bring about an aliyah for the neshama. In other words, that the neshama should become even more and more elevated through our deeds. Even though that neshama can no longer do anything for itself, the light that is present down here through a child or through anybody else is able to be mashpia. As we said before, light is mashpia. It could give, it could contribute even to those who are no longer with us, because there is a connection. And that connection is best seen in a wick. That flame cannot be by itself in this world. You can't light a flame. The flame has to be lit onto something. You have to have a wick, a candle. So that wick or candle is the physical body, is the guf. As long as the neshama is attached to a wick, in other words, to a candle, right, it is able to operate, to function. A neshama by itself, a light, a flame, cannot be without something. So that petil, that wick, is the connecting point between the neshama and the physical body. In some other way, there is a connection between the neshamot up there and down here below. And that is why we go and pray at their graves, not to them, we're praying to Hashem always, but we're asking them also to speak up for us and do for us. In other words, they can hear us. There's always that connection, even though they're in a different realm. So the lighting of a candle for the neshama apparently does do something for that neshama. That is what our tradition says. Now, just like this light that we call neshama, if it's taken away from a physical body, from a human being, that human being dies. Because a human being without the neshama, without that flame, is like a candle without a flame. It's useless. It doesn't do anything. When the candle is important or is useful when it's lit. So just like this candle is considered dead when the flame is not there, there are times, however, when people are not completely dead, the neshama has not completely left them, but the light in them has become extinguished. The best way to understand this is when a person is asleep. When a person is asleep, he's not completely alive. Rabbis tell us that sleep is chad mishishim yamavet, is 1/60th of death. You know, the physical body is pretty much not active, except for the pumping of the blood and some breathing. Otherwise, it's completely not active. So in some ways it's extinguished, but it's not completely extinguished. There's something there, otherwise it would be dead. So there are people, unfortunately, that even though they're walking, Baruch Hashem, they're healthy and alive, but the neshama in them, that light that Hashem has given them, is pretty much extinguished. What does that mean, that it's extinguished? Well, just like a person who's asleep is dead in some ways, he's not active, these people who are alive and walking are not exactly active in the area where they should be active. Eating and drinking and walking is not the activity that we're talking about. Because that, even animals do. The human being is special, he's unique, he has a different mission than animals. He's not just here to work, eat and drink and have fun, right? He's here for some other purpose, for some higher mission. And Am Yisrael even a greater mission than the average human being. So if a person is not involved in that mission, if he's not doing what he's meant to be doing, it's like his spark or his flame or his light is extinguished in him. It's not doing anything for him. And the reason why that happens is because he's not connected to the tachlit. Tachlit means to his ultimate purpose, to his ultimate mission of what he's supposed to be doing, or he's not thinking about it, or he's not working towards that mission. He may be aware, but he's not doing anything about it. All of that is an indicator that the light in this individual is somewhat extinguished. Now, in life, there are many challenges. People have ups and downs. People go through all kinds of experiences in life, some not very easy, a lot of struggles. And some of the greatest struggles we're talking about in the past few weeks are the struggles with one's midot, anger, arrogance, and ta'avot, desires. All of this has to do, of course, with the physical body, who has these cravings or these aspirations or whatever they are that are not exactly good. So we have challenges. People can get easily upset. People can easily get into a situation where they are being tested in one of their midot. And the question is, how do you best survive these things? Even though Baruch Hashem will be talking about solutions, echlit moded, how to handle each one of these midot, these characteristics, separately, but in general terms, if a person wants to succeed in life, in all the challenges that arise, it would help if he would know what he's here for. Because if a person knows what he's here for, he's not going to become distracted by too many things. People get distracted. And that is why sometimes they forget what they're here for. In this week's parasha, Parashat Vayeshev, when Yosef is looking for his brothers, somebody meets him. Who's that somebody? The rabbis tell us it was a malach, Gabriel. Even though it says somebody met him and asked him, what are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers. So he tells him, I heard they were going to this and this place. The rabbi tells us this was a malach. But what were the words that he told Yosef? Ma tevakesh. What exactly are you looking for? And the commentaries explain that is exactly what each one of us should be doing. We should be asking ourselves, what do we really want? What do we want to accomplish? What is the reason why we're here? What's the purpose of everything? Where do we want to head? Where do we want to get to? What's our final destination? People don't ask this question. And I always like to use my favorite example of somebody getting into a bus and not knowing where he's going. I think most people who go into a bus usually know where they're going, right? They even pay for it. They better know where they're going. But you'd be surprised that many people in this world are alive and are like those individuals who are riding in a bus not knowing where they're going because they have no clear definition of what life is all about. So it's like not knowing where you're going. So the malach tells Yosef, Ma tevakesh, besides the simple interpretation of your brothers, what are you looking for, who are you looking for, the deeper meaning is, what is it that you want of life? In other words, if you're about to go through many challenges, Yosef is about to go through many, many challenges, temptations, and all kinds of situations where his emunah, his integrity will be tested. And in order to survive, in order to succeed, the malach tells him, you want to succeed? Ma tevakesh. What is it exactly that you want? What do you want to become? What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? If a person knows what his tachlit is, what his purpose and mission is, more or less, the chances are less that he will the chances are smaller that he will deviate from the goal, from the matara. Take, for example, the gold rush. For those of you who read about the gold rush in California, in the West, the people ran, people rushed. The gold rush, right? They rushed to make gold because they found a lot of gold. Yeah, even today there's some gold if you know where to look. There's gold in Northern California. They didn't take all of it, right? There's still somewhere there. So people rushed, and some people made money, some people lost their life because of that. But what's interesting about it, that even though they knew that there were dangers involved in pursuing, going after the gold, you think they cared? They ignored all the dangers. They didn't think about anything else, not about their families, not about anything, except make money, except to get rich fast, to find the gold. What is happening in the gold rush? What's happening in the gold rush is very, very simple. People are focusing. They're focusing, mitmakdim. They're focusing on finding gold. And because they're focusing on something, it is easy for them to ignore everything else. When you are focused on something, if you're really focused, it's easier to ignore everything else, even danger, even not to eat. Sometimes a person is so involved in what he's doing, he forgot to eat breakfast, he forgot to eat lunch, right? He forgot to sleep. Sometimes you're so involved, you're focused, that you forget. You're not distracted. So in the same way that the gold rush brought about this focus, the same is true with life. In order for one not to be distracted by the Yetzer Hara, by all the temptations of the evil inclinations, by all of life's challenges, don't be distracted. One has to be focused on what am I here for? We're here for a number of years. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to accomplish? What is really important and what's not? If a person focuses, the chances are greater for success. Another example that I use to explain this point is the most dangerous sport of all. What's the most dangerous sport of all? Anybody know? The most dangerous sport. Mountain climbing. Mountain climbing is the most dangerous sport. And in order to succeed, you need three things. Besides the tools, obviously. You need first the determination to reach the peak. Like la pisga, you have to have a determination. You have to have the ratzon, the will, to go there. If you don't have it, then you're not going to go too far. You have to first have the will, the desire, the interest to get to the top. Number two, you need a lot of patience, because it's difficult, it's slow, you don't want to make a mistake, so you need a lot of patience. You may slip, so you need a lot of patience. And number three, you have to be focused. You have to be focused on getting there. You can't be distracted by things on the side, otherwise you will lose your grip. You will lose your grip on the rope or on the rock or wherever you are, and you will not make it to the top. So we see from that even in that kind of a situation, which involves many risks and dangers, one of the ingredients for success is to be focused. And in this way, one will not be easily distracted by the various things that can occur, and if he Chas v'Shalom may fail. This is all an introduction into what happens to people in life who are not focused, who do not think too much about what they're supposed to be doing, do not use their sechel properly, and get distracted. The Yevanim, the Greeks, right? We're talking about Chanuka right now, and the Greeks were in control of a large portion of the Middle East during the middle of the Second Temple era. About 200 years or so into the Second Temple era, Second Beit Sheni, they are the ones that were in charge of that area. And they had, of course, their own agenda, their philosophy, their way of life that they wanted to preach. Now, when the Greeks came along and tried to convert people to their way of thinking, to their way of life, you think they were doing it because they were so convinced that they were right? You know, the Muslims believe in jihad, either you convert or you die. They want to make everybody Muslims. Well, they want to, of course, get everybody to believe in what they believe. But the Greeks were very smart. It was not just to export Greek philosophy. If you're able to get somebody to think like you, to behave like you, to be like you, then he's not going to be your enemy. How do you defeat someone? Well, you don't have to use jihad. You don't have to use force. You try to show him democracy is the best way to live a life, right? And by the way, democracy comes from them too. By showing the beauty of their religion, their culture, their beliefs, they were very much convincing that this is the way of life. And in this way, what were they doing? They were erasing the sechel of the Jew. They were trying to contaminate the sechel of the Jew, erase it from any connection to emunah in the Borei Olam, in the Creator of the world. Of course, they had a completely different idea of how the world came to be, and the main distinction, one of the main differences between the Greeks and the Jews, one of them, there's a lot more, is that even though they believe that the world did come about through a creator, they did not believe that this creator is still around, Shu adayin mashgiach al ha'olam, that he's still supervising the world. He left. He's no longer there. Therefore, you can do whatever you want. In other words, he's no longer the main focus of life. Ha'adam, the man, is the main focus. That is why they believed in exercise, in building the muscles, and you see a lot of psalim, a lot of statues of human beings, big and small, in different shapes and forms. In other words, that the human being is the center of everything, the most important thing in the world. And the man is the one that needs to be worshipped and perfected and refined and so forth. But of course, along with that came all kinds of other ideas that were also not compatible with the Torah. But this is just one idea, that they did not believe that Hashem is involved in this world. He may have created the world, but azav tashetach, he's no longer around. And that is where people had the question of why tzaddik, v'ralo rasha v'tovo. You can easily ask a question that may appear to support their idea. And that is, why do the wicked prosper and the righteous have such a hard time? If there is a borei, im yesh mashgiach, if somebody is supervising, if there is justice, where's the justice? How come all the crooks are getting away with it? That's what it appears. But that was a whole different lecture that we spoke about separately, that it's not really so. But short term, or if you look at things narrowly, you might actually have that question, why are things like that? If there is an all-kind, loving God, where was he at the Holocaust? Right? So people can easily fall into this trap if you press the wrong buttons, and that's what the Greeks did. By contaminating the sechel. Now, how do they contaminate the sechel, the mind? How do they extinguish that godliness, that light in them? By bringing about doubts in emunah, by showing how beautiful their culture is, in all sorts of ways. And Jews fell for it. You had mityavnim, you had Hellenists, you had Jews who fell for this. Very simple. By looking at the customs, at the behavior of the Greeks, by going to their gymnasiums, by going to their schools, by speaking their languages and so forth, they became assimilated to their culture. And that is how the Greeks intended to disconnect, to detach the Yehudi, the Jew, from his religion. Now you can begin to understand the whole idea of oil, or light. As we started saying, the light has to do with the sechel, with the neshama. Oil, the miracle, or one of the miracles of Chanuka has to do with oil. Oil is something that floats above water, right? And that has much symbolism in itself. The oil floating on top of the water, meaning that the Jewish people are on top. They should not mix, just like oil does not mix with water. So the oil has a lot of symbolism. But besides the symbolism, the fact that oil is on top is supposed to remind us that the sechel should rule. In other words, be careful on how you use your sechel. The sechel was placed on the head, the highest top of the highest part of the body, and not everybody uses that sechel. They use their feelings, they use their own interests that they may have, other than the sechel, the logical, cold, pure sechel. The sechel should be on top. The sechel should be the one that should make the decision. So the oil is sitting on top. The oil sitting on top also represents or reminds us of the koach ha'elyon, of the greatest force of all. And it's not man. There's something above man, and that is God. That is what the kippah is for. The kippah is above the head to remind us that above this important head that has the brains, that has the sechel, is another entity that is above us, that we fear, that we respect, that we revere. That is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the kippah, the covering of the head, is intended to demonstrate to all who see us and to remind ourselves, Yesh od koach elyon alenu. There's another higher power above us. So the human being is not the highest, he's not the greatest. There's someone above us who's watching over us, who knows everything we do, knows our thoughts, knows it, because he gave us the mind. Of course he knows everything that's in the mind. So that's the kippah, and that's the shemen in some ways that is floating above. referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And perhaps another idea, the shemen, after all, is the ultimate result of the olive. Even though people eat olives, the real essence of the shemen, of why people grow it, is for its oil. The more important part of the olive is its oil, its juice. That is the tachlit, the ultimate purpose of the zayit. And that is what is supposed to remind us of our tachlit. The ultimate purpose of life is the light of the Torah, the light of Hashem. That is the tachlit, that is the goal. It's not just what we see on the surface. There's something deep in there that we have to discover, that we have to bring out into this world. These are just some of the ideas of what this shemen represents. In other words, the exact opposite of what the Greeks were trying to teach. There is a tachlit. There is a koach elyon. There is something above us, and that we're not the most important thing. The Greeks, nevertheless, tried very, very hard to remove any vestige of emunah from the Jew. The reason why they did that, through gezerot, through decrees, and by force, and in all kinds of ways, the reason they did that is not only, as we said before, to win them over, to defeat them. They knew that by removing emunah, especially emunah from the Jew, by extinguishing that light, ayudi hazeh yitbolel. That is the easiest way to get the Jew to assimilate and to intermarry and to become a Greek. Because ultimately you can teach and they can embrace it, but who says they're going to become like the Greeks? The Greeks had this agenda of wanting to assimilate or integrate everybody, to become like them. How do you get the Jew to do that? The Jew is a stubborn guy. But how do you get him to do it? You can't fight him. He's strong. He has emunah. You have to take away that emunah. Right? The Germans in Machshemam, what did they do when they first entered the Jewish community? They tried to take away the Torah. They tried to take away the leaders, the rabbis. Because in this way the Jew would lose hope. They would not fight as hard. They had no leaders to encourage them, to stimulate them. Right? So they try to disconnect the community from any source of strength. So he had tried to extinguish that light in the Jew, try to remove his emunah. And once the emunah becomes weak enough, even if it's not completely gone, if it's weak enough, then of course the ground is fertile for assimilation and intermarriage. And of course, once the Jew becomes weak in emunah, the Greek is able to defeat him. He doesn't have to work too hard. He on his own becomes like him. So a very important point that we remind ourselves in Chanuka is that in order for a Jew to survive, in order for his faith to be intact, he has to always, constantly fight to stay alive. Fight to stay alive. In other words, we cannot be calm, that everything is okay, that the waters are calm, that nothing's going to happen. There will always be gormim chitzonim, always be outside external factors that will attempt to extinguish that light in the Jew if he does not fight for his survival. Fighting for one's survival, fighting for what we believe in, is represented in the Chanukiah, in the lighting of the candles, in reminding ourselves that our biggest struggle and our main fight is for kavod shamayim. We're fighting for the honor of Hashem. It's not really for our own honor. In other words, our survival depends on if we fight for the kavod shamayim. To fight for kavod shamayim, for the honor of Hashem, we have to demonstrate our emunah openly. So when we light the Chanukiah, when we light the candles, and put it in public, is to show that this is what we identify with, this is what we want everybody to know about us. This gives us the strength to practice what we preach in the open, publicly. A lot of people hide their Jewishness. They may practice it in their home, but outside they don't. They're ashamed, they're afraid, or whatever. Part of staying alive as a Jew, part of of fighting for what you believe in is doing so in the open. In Spain and Portugal, all the Jews who were Marranos, who practiced their Judaism in private, in cellars, underground, after a couple generations, their kids intermarried, and there's very little left of their Jewishness. You can't do that for too long and survive. So since we just said that part of our survival requires continuous fighting and struggling and working hard for Kavod Shamayim, it requires to do so in the open. Otherwise, if one does not do so, then it's very easy for that light in him to be extinguished. As we said in the very beginning, we all have that light in us, but the light sometimes is extinguished. People are not fighting for what they believe in, and eventually it's completely gone. And if the emunah is not gone completely from them, then it may be gone from their children. 3 generations ago, the first Jews that came to this country still had some emunah, but they dropped it little by little. They became weaker, their light became extinguished, and their kids and grandchildren are completely assimilated and intermarried, unfortunately. It happens gradually. If you don't fight for it, then there will be too many things out there that will extinguish it. And one of them will be, if you don't come to work on Saturday, sir, then we'll fire you. We need you to work on Saturday. What does a Jew who just came over from Eastern Europe do when he's looking for a job and they tell him you got to work on Shabbat? Some Jews didn't give up the Shabbat. Those who didn't give up Shabbat, their children are still Jewish. Their grandchildren are still Jewish. Those who gave up the Shabbat, those who threw away the Shabbat and other mitzvot, many of them, not all, but many of them, their children, their grandchildren are no longer Jewish or have intermarried. Being Jewish, remaining Jewish, requires continuous fighting for what we believe in and fighting for it in the open. So the Greeks, in their attempt to extinguish that light, little by little infiltrated the Jewish people by taking away various of their mitzvot. And the common denominator of those decrees were to remove the Jews' belief that Hashem is a mashgiach, that Hashem actually supervises. Whether it was removing the Shabbat or limiting their observance of Shabbat or other mitzvot, their main goal was to remove that idea from the Jews' emunah. Not that God didn't create the world. There was no Big Bang theory back then. It was just that He's not around. He's not involved. He's not supreme. Okay, get that out of your mind. And what did the miracles of Chanuka prove? They proved that the Greeks were wrong. Because the miracles of Hanukkah involved something supernatural. The few defeating the many, the little bit of oil lasting 8 days. I mean, that's not natural. That is Ashgacha Elyonah. So those Hellenist Jews, the Mityavnim, were able to see, wait a minute, we were wrong. Look at this. This small group of Maccabim were able to defeat thousands upon thousands of Greeks, soldiers, experienced soldiers. It must be that this was a nes. So there was a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. The miracle, again, was not only to save the Jews, it was not only to restore the service of the Bet HaMikdash, it was to restore the light that was extinguished by the Greeks. It was to restore and to strengthen their emunah that has become weaker, unfortunately. Because not everybody is strong. And some people become assimilated to the ways of the Goyim. That's why you have to be very, very careful. Because the victim of that assimilation will be one's emunah, will become weaker and weaker and weaker until it's completely lost. And this man or woman is assimilated to the Goyim. So the miracles of Hanukkah demonstrated the exact opposite of what the Greeks believed. Not only did Hashem create the world, He continuously supervises the world. He's involved in the world. He's always supreme. He's always around. This is something that the Jew needed not to forget, Chas v'shalom. For those of you who have a chance to read Parashat Vayeshev and Miketz, you will notice that in these two parashiyot especially, there is an emphasis, a dagesh on Ashgacha. Everything that is happening in Parashat Vayeshev and Miketz, of Yosef being sold as a slave, being thrown into a pit, eventually landing in jail, eventually becoming the viceroy in Egypt. All of this is B'Hashgacha Elyona. It was even seen in a dream by Yosef himself. Obviously, everything is being manipulated from above. Even though the brothers were wrong in selling him as a slave, right? Even though that act was not right, nevertheless, ultimately, it had to happen. If they wouldn't have done it, somebody else would have done it. So they didn't have to do it. So they were not right in doing what they did. But the whole episode of Yosef and the brothers, Parashat Vayeshev and Miketz, is all B'Hashgacha Elyona, tremendous Hashgacha that is very, very clear. However, Yosef did not know this in the very beginning. Later on, when his brothers come to him and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, please don't take revenge upon us," Yosef says, "You think it was my doing? You think I have any say in this matter? It was all Hashem, Elohim, that made all of this happen, that you all eventually came down to Egypt." So we see that Yosef eventually does understand and does say those words. Everything was Mishamayim. Don't worry about it. You think I have anything to do with this? But in the beginning, Yosef is not so sure. How do we know he's not so sure? Because when he was in jail, he asks the Sarah Mashkim, the butler, "You're about to get out. Please remember me. I did you a favor. Get me out of here. Because here I didn't do anything to deserve this." So the rabbis tell us Yosef was 10 years in jail so far. But because he asked the Sarah Mashkim a favor, he got 2 more additional years. So he was stuck there for 12 years. So the big question is, well, wait a minute. First of all, Yosef has bitachon in Hashem. You can't accuse him of not having faith in Hashem and asking favors from individuals. On the other hand, he did ask a favor. Okay, what's wrong with asking a favor? You're allowed to even bribe and do whatever you can to get out of jail. I mean, if it's going to work for you, try anything you can. So some say the problem of Yosef was that on his level, he should not have relied on anybody but Hashem. That's one way of looking at it. But the other idea that I once said is as follows. One of Yosef's faults may be that when he tells the butler, "Get me out of here because I didn't do anything here to deserve this," Hashem says, "What? You're saying you don't deserve this? It's all Mishamayim. Of course you deserve it. You're getting what you deserve. There's a kapara, there's atonement. You're sitting in jail for some reason. And what got you into jail to begin with? That Eshet Potifar accused him of some wrongdoing, which he never did. The wife, she says something against him. Well, that should have reminded Yosef that perhaps this is a kapara for what he did to his brothers. After all, what did he do to his brothers? He also accused them of a wrongdoing, which they never necessarily, it was not all completely accurate what he said. So you see, ultimately, there is a midah keneged midah. Everything happens mishamayim. You don't land in jail for no reason. There was a reason. There was obviously a reason why you landed in jail, why you're suffering. Akol mishamayim. Midah keneged midah, kapara, an atonement. So Yosef, in some ways, is questioning this. I don't deserve this. Oh, you don't deserve this? You get 2 more years. But if you really, really analyze the parasha, you can see clearly that everything is b'hashgacha. This point of recognizing that there's hashgacha elyona is very important, because the more a Jew remembers that everything is me'ashamayim, that everything is directed from above, his emunah will be strengthened. And this makes a big difference. If one's emunah is strengthened or not, can make a big difference at time of need. In other words, when there's a great need, and a Jew is asked to give up his life. Yarek v'al yavor, limsor tanefesh. How many Jews are willing to give up their life for what they believe in? Well, depending on how strong their emunah is. If they realize that akol mishamayim, that this is a test for them, this needs to be like that, it will be easier for them to give up their life. But those whose emunah is not so strong, who's very weak, they're going to have a difficult time. They may convert Khalila if they're asked to. They may commit a sin because they're weak. So the stronger the emunah is, that everything is b'hashgacha elyona, with divine providence, the stronger the Jew will be, and then he will be capable of self-sacrifice. Now we can understand what the rabbis tell us. The rabbis tell us that the earlier generations, the generations of the Tanaim, they had miracles. Miracles were performed to them openly and constantly. And the Gemara asks why that generation had miracles more than the later generations. So the Gemara answers because the earlier generations were capable of giving their life for what they believed in. They gave their life. They really were so devoted, so strong in their emunah that they were willing to sacrifice their life for it. In the later generations, not as much. Okay, that's a nice answer, but why the later generations not as much as the first? They were also believers. In other words, why, for example, today, not everybody has that ability to give up his life, even though we're also believers in Hashem. So what's the difference? You know where you can tell the difference? The difference is a true believer, when he does something, his main goal in what he's doing, in performing the mitzvah, is that it should be done l'shem shamayim. His whole mindset is, why am I doing this? I'm doing this for Hashem, not doing this for myself. If you read the prophets, if you ever have a chance to read Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, you will see that it's very strange. And we're talking about the first temple era. They're complaining about the Jewish people back then doing things superficially. Praying? It's not even real prayer, it's just lip service. Bringing an animal? You think they really mean as a sacrifice for Hashem to beg him for repentance? No, it's just it becomes a routine. That's how some people pray today. It's just a routine. They go through it very quickly. They don't focus on the words they say. They don't understand what they're saying. They just rush through it. Boom. Hashem says, I don't need your favors coming to trample into my temple and just offering lip service, bringing me cheap animals that you bought at the 99-cent store. Right? Cheap, defective. Things that are... Hashem says, I don't need this. Don't do me any favors. I know that you're not really motivated to do it for the real reason. Then what are you doing? It's a show. It's a farce. That's what the prophets are complaining about. Hashem says, I don't care for your holidays. I don't care for your sacrifices. Don't give me this stuff. It's meaningless to me. It's not being done for real. It's not the Shem Shamayim. So even though a person can be a believer, if he doesn't get used to doing things the Shem Shamayim for the sake of God, for its real purpose, then when the time comes and he's being expected to give his life, how is he going to give his life? He doesn't have that strength. In other words, think about it. A person who does not do it l'shem shamayim, then why is he doing it? He's doing it more for himself, for his own satisfaction, or he's doing it to impress somebody. He's not doing it l'shem shamayim, then why is he doing it? He's doing it for whatever other reason, but not for the real reasons. If it's not for the real reason, it's only for a personal gain or interest, that does not give him the strength to be makriv, to self-sacrifice. When a person says, this is all for Hashem, it's all for Hashem, I only do this for God, that God is the most important thing in my life, then his emunah is strong, he's not shakeable, then he can possibly even give his life for what he believes in. But if somebody is not doing things for the real reason, it's not Hashem Shamayim, he's faking it, he's rushing through it, he's not sincere, how will he muster the strength when the time comes that he has to give his life? He won't be able to. The Maccabim, because they did everything Hashem Shamayim, not for self-gain, they really did it for the kavod, for the honor of Hashem. That is why Hashem made miracles for them. They deserved the miracles. Even though Hashem from time to time shows miracles in all kinds of situations, but in that particular situation, this is what Hashem, of course, expected and wanted to see. And this small group, who were not contaminated, whose light was not extinguished, who were fervent and had the ardor to be Jewish openly, they actually were willing to fight for it. So we're going to get up and do something about it. In other words, they had the courage. Where do they take the courage? How come we don't see that today? People have the courage to stand up. Some people do, but not everybody, because the emunah is not as strong. It's not always l'shem shamayim. When people do something l'shem shamayim, then Hashem is first in their life. When people don't do it l'shem shamayim, that means they have other agendas first in their life. Their family, their kids, their business, their work, their money. That is first, and Chas v'shalom, Jewishness is second. And that is why they work on Shabbat. How does a Jew work on Shabbat? It says clearly in the Torah that you cannot do that. How do you do that? Because his money is first and God is second. It's very simple. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's not because he thinks that it's okay. He knows it's not okay. It's written so in the Torah. You can look it up. It's black and white. But in his mind, the order of priorities is wrong. He is first, his money is first, his family is first, and his religion is second. But for one whose faith is number one, for one whose God is number one, above everything else, God forbid, he would never even dream of giving that up for all the money in the world. I don't know if any of you heard of the story of Rashi's father. You know who Rashi is? The greatest commentator that we have in the Torah. Without Rashi, we would not understand Gemara, Mishnayot, Chumash. He illuminated, he brought light into the world. So you wonder, who was his father that deserved to bring this beautiful, pure soul into this world? Well, his father was a regular, ordinary man. But the story was that he dealt with gems, and he had a beautiful, beautiful gem, beautiful, large stone. And some people came to him to buy it, and he asked them what it was for, and they said it was for a big idol. He said, for an idol? I'm never going to sell it for you to put it in an idol, avodah zarah. So they left, and they came back, and they tricked him. How did they trick him? They came back, and they told him, we have a good business deal for you, and it requires for us to travel to the other side of town, and they have to cross a river. As they were in the water, the plan was disclosed to him, that it's eventually going to go to this island. And you have no way out of it right now. You're in the boat, you're going there, and he immediately threw that gem into the water. He was willing to lose who knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that should not go to be in the head of an idol. Nashamayim, of course, they were very impressed. How does a guy throw away so much money? Because of his strong beliefs, they said, we're going to reward you. I don't think he had any kids till then. No kids. They're going to reward him not only with a child, but with a child that will illuminate, will be like the jewel of the Jewish nation in the commentary that he will write. So that is how the neshama of Rashi came down, through self-sacrifice, through a Jew believing strongly in what he believes and willing to give everything up, money-wise, but not to give up his faith. Where do you get that strength and courage from? Obviously, only from somebody whose emunah is unshakable. So, one who has a strong emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu for him is always number one. Rabbis tell us that another idea that can perhaps give us tremendous strength is as follows. Whoever thinks that satisfying Hashem is enough is wrong. You also have to satisfy human beings. And this is the way the rabbis tell us. כשם שצריך אדם לצאת ידי חובת שמיים, כך צריך אדם לצאת ידי חובת הבריות. In the same way that you have to satisfy Hashem, in other words, and do everything right in His eyes, you also have to do things right in the eyes of human beings. What does that mean? A person has to be careful that people should not suspect him. And that is the famous halakha of marit ayin. You will find a lot in Shulchan Aruch that many things are prohibited because of marit ayin. People might think wrong of you. People might get the wrong idea. People might learn the wrong halakha from doing certain things. So you have to be careful with certain things, not because they are forbidden, only because people who see you from a distance may not understand what you're doing, and they will come to do the wrong thing. And they will come to interpret what you did as being wrong, and they may think of you as a rasha. Now, even though we have the obligation of giving people the benefit of the doubt, you see somebody going into McDonald's, what are you going to think? He's going to eat a cheeseburger? Chaz v'shalom. You're supposed to think he's probably going to the restroom, he's probably going to make a phone call, or he's probably going to buy a drink. That's what we're supposed to always give a person the benefit of the doubt. But that individual should not rely on that. Oh, they're going to judge me favorably. Mapitom, they're going to think of you negatively. People always look for the negative, not for the positive. So you have to be careful in all kinds of situations not to bring about suspicion on you. Now, why am I bringing you this point? Because this point is a very important point. In order for a Jew to really maintain his integrity, to be strong, he has no choice, he has to be careful with what people think of him. Some people say, well, I couldn't care less what people say. No, you can't do that. Because it could be a Chilul Hashem. It could be, God forbid, a desecration of Hashem's name if one's conduct is not proper. So the big question is, what can we do to be able to be always a good example for people not to have the wrong idea and wrong impression of us? After all, we have no control over what people say and what people observe. How do we control that? How do we make sure that we do satisfy people, that people have nothing negative to say about us? It's very difficult, but one way to do it is what we said before, the same idea, to do things l'shem shamayim. When a person does something for the sake of Hashem, he has no personal gain, he doesn't do it for himself, his chances are better that people will not say anything negative about him. When a person does something which is not 100%, then there's room for people's suspicions. That is how we know Yosef was not 100% right in accusing his brothers. Even though some things may have been okay, many other things he was not right. He should have asked them, why are you doing this? Instead of going to his father and accusing them of doing something which he thought they were, which they were not, whenever you have a question about somebody's questionable behavior, go to him. If you can ask him, ask him. Don't judge him or give him the benefit of the doubt. Otherwise, we're running the risk of judging wrong, judging negatively, being wrong, and that will lead us to have the wrong impression of an individual. And we know Yosef was not completely right because he was later punished because of that. As I said earlier, he was accused of a wrongdoing that he never really did with the wife of Potiphar. So therefore, if a person always takes upon himself to do things l'shem shamayim, the chances are he will do it right. He will not be suspected of doing the wrong thing. He will be successful in what he's doing because he's doing it l'shem shamayim. He's not doing it for personal gain. So this l'shem shamayim is also very helpful in not being in people's mouths. You don't want to be in people's mouth. You want to make sure that people have the right thing to say about you, not the wrong thing. Do things not for personal gain, but for l'shem shamayim. Okay, now that we've covered some ideas here on Chanuka, one of the questions that still remains is, it's not easy. It's not easy to do things 100% right. The Maccabim were a small group of people. What happened to everybody else? Nobody did anything? Why don't you join the fight? And I've explained in the past years that the reason why the rest of Am Yisrael did not join the fight is because apparently they were already weakened. Their light was somewhat diminished. And when your light is diminished, you don't have the desire, the courage. I'm going to go fight. It's going to go away. You can't fight City Hall, some people say. That's what some people, what are you going to do? So I'd like to add this additional point. For those people who think that it's better to sit and do nothing, the miracle of Hanukkah happens with one pach of shemen, one container of oil. Why didn't Hashem make a miracle that a whole bunch of oil is found? Well, just one little, just to show you what happened from the one little pach. From what one little container you had oil, a little oil that lasted 8 days. You see from this that alidei ma'aseh katan, even if you do a small action, one little act, it can go a long ways. A Jew has to try his best, even though it's true, I agree, that to always do 100% everything l'shem shamayim and everything right is not easy, true. That does not mean you shouldn't do anything right. Do whatever you can. Whoever does a little bit, Hashem will help him. But if we don't do anything, then we won't get any assistance from above. Rabbis tell us, Kol haba litaher misayin oto min hashamayim. Whoever wants to become clean, wants to be pure, wants to do the right thing, he will receive this divine assistance. You don't want to do anything? You don't want to make any effort? Then you won't get any help. You can't sit home and do nothing. You have to go out and do something. If you go out and try, then the beracha will come. If you sit at home, nothing will happen. So the Jews have to learn this lesson from Hanukkah, is when things like this resurface again in the future, Chas v'Shalom, you can't sit back and do nothing. You have to fight. You have to do a little bit. Do whatever you can. If you do a little bit, then Hashem will help you. Another idea that we find in Hanukkah is that even though the halakha says that they did not need to wait to find pure oil, they could have lit the Chanukiah with, even though they were unclean. Tum'ah, if the majority of the congregation is tameh, they are allowed to take care of that. They're allowed to perform certain things in the Bet HaMikdash, even betum'ah. Then how come they had to have the clean oil? How come they insisted on finding clean oil? The reason for that, the commentators explain, is because we were talking about a new beginning. Chanuka is also Chanukat Habayit, the inauguration of the Bet HaMikdash, the re-inauguration of the service, which was canceled for a while by the Greeks. You want to start something, when you start something, you start it the right way. You start it clean and pure. You don't start with compromises. A lot of Jews compromise. Sometimes there's something called b'di'avad in the halakha. B'di'avad, second choice, no other choice. This may be an alternative. We use olive oil. Olive oil is the best oil. There are other oils that you could use. You can use candles too from wax. But what's the best? The best and the purest is olive oil. Not only because the mitzvah was with olive oil, but because that is the more hidur, that is the more beautiful way to do the mitzvah. When a Jew performs a mitzvah, ideally, he should do it as best as possible. He should not be cheap about it, especially if it's a new beginning. When you're building something, building a new home, sending a child to school, this is his beginning, his formation. You want to send him to the best, to the top. Don't make compromises. Making compromises in the beginning is a recipe for disaster later on. The beginning is the foundations. The foundations have to be strong. So therefore, in the Chanuka of the Bet HaMikdash, in the re-inauguration of the service, they wanted to do it with complete purity, even though they could have done it with a lack of purity. But Chaz v'Shalom, in order for something to be strong, you want to do it as best as possible. And perhaps the lesson from this, an additional lesson from this, is that every individual from time to time has to make a Chanuka for himself. Chanuka, meaning to re-inaugurate. What do we re-inaugurate? People need from time to time itchadshut. Itchadshut means renewal. We go on vacation to relieve our stress, right? The tension in our life. We need to refresh ourselves. A Jew needs to refresh his batteries, his spiritual batteries. That's called his personal Chanuka. He has to recommit himself, rededicate himself to the service of Hashem. That is what Teshuvah is all about. In other words, that a person comes to the realization that what he has done till now was not perfect. Well, I have the chance to do it over again. From now on, my prayers are going to be better. My mitzvot are going to be better. My achnasat orchim is going to be better. In other words, I have the opportunity to rejuvenate, to renew, to rededicate with more strength, with more sincerity, with more purity, this mitzvah. And that is why this mitzvah of Chanukah, of the Chanukiah, of the lighting, has been established for future generations. That every generation, every year, we relight the candles, even though the victory was so long ago, the miracles were so long ago. The idea of doing this is because when we light the candles, what are we saying? This is important to us. What's important to us? The lighting of the candles is important. Do you know what you're doing? You're just lighting? What's important to you? What's important to us is as follows. Today the world is going through a tremendous amount of darkness. As the Prophet says, there will be a darkness that will envelop the entire world. That is the darkness of kfirah, of heresy. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, science has become very powerful. Science has become a religion. A culture and has become very, very influential, and has, of course, taken over many people's minds to believe that this is the koach elyon. This is a tremendous amount of darkness where God is not, unfortunately, not as important in people's lives as it used to be. So when we light the Chanukiah, what we're saying is several things. First of all, a Jew does not despair. Lo mityaesh, even if he's in galut, even though there's so much darkness and decrease, we don't despair. Hashem has made miracles in the past. He will make miracles again. We don't give up because of that, our religion. Just because things are tough, we don't just give up. We continue. In the same way things were tough in the past, and Baruch Hashem, Hashem's helped us, He will help us again. We don't despair. Lighting of the candles is also to remind us that we need to light the neshama of many Jews out there whose light is extinguished. And that's what we do so by the window. We do so at a time when people are walking by so they can see it. So they can see the light and, oh, wait a minute, it's Chanuka now. Oy vavoy, chas v'shalom, if a Jew who has Jewish origins, his mother's Jewish, has an X tree, you know what I mean by that, an Xmas tree in his living room and doesn't have the Chanukiah, that shows how far he has become from Judaism, how his light is extinguished. But this does exist in mixed marriages where they have that tree in the living room. They're confused. They don't know anything about themselves. So by lighting the Chanukiah, this light is not only for ourselves, this light is also supposed to go out in public to remind those who do not have the light to bring in the light into their homes. And finally, when we light the candles, we're also saying blessings. We're saying Hallel during Hanukkah. All of this is not only to praise and to thank Hashem for the miracles, but it's also a continuous prayer as we light the Chanukiah, that we're, B'ezrat Hashem, hoping and praying that soon the light of Mashiach should reveal itself all over the world, and that should hopefully happen very soon. Amen.